You know how people talk about the deep woods, the really remote places where the trails end and the maps just show green. People always say they feel like they're being watched out there. Well, let me tell you something, they are. I spent 25 years as the sheriff of Macon County, North Carolina. I've seen things that would make your blood run cold. I've pulled hikers out of ravines, hunted fugitives through thick brush, and dealt with more than my fair share of bear encounters. I thought I'd seen everything the mountains had to offer, but what we found up in the Nantahala National Forest, what was captured on that body cam, it changed everything. It's the reason I don't sleep anymore, and it's the reason the people in charge are terrified. It started like a dozen other calls we get every year when the tourist season kicks into high gear. A family from Florida, the Millers, had vanished. Their minivan was found at the Deep Creek trailhead, locked up tight, with a half-eaten bag of chips on the dashboard. They were 3 days overdue. Now, this isn't completely unusual. People get turned around, they underestimate the terrain, or they decide to camp an extra night without telling anyone. But something about this one felt wrong from the start. The woods were too quiet. There were no cars at all in the parking lot, which was strange for a Tuesday. I sent my two best deputies, Sarah Jenkins and Mark Donovan, to do the initial sweep of the trail. Sarah was my goddaughter. I'd known her since she was born, and she was tougher than any 3 men I knew. She understood those woods better than anyone, except maybe some of the old Cherokee trackers who live up near the reservation. Mark was newer, a hotshot from Atlanta who thought he knew everything but was a good deputy nonetheless. They were supposed to hike the first 5 miles, check the campsites, and radio back. Just a routine search. Their first call came in around 11 in the morning. They'd found the Millers' campsite, or what was left of it. And that's when everything went sideways. Mark was the one who made the call, but I could hear Sarah in the background, and her voice was shaky. The campsite was a mess, but not like a bear had done it. A bear tears things, looking for food. This was different. The tent was shredded, but the pieces were laid out in some kind of pattern. Their supplies, their backpacks, their sleeping bags, they were all torn open and emptied, but the contents were arranged in neat little piles. Food in one pile, clothes in another, gear in a third. It was methodical. It was intelligent. Then Sarah came on the radio, her voice just a whisper. "Sheriff," she said, "you need to see these tracks." They sent me the pictures over the satellite phone. My heart instantly dropped. These weren't bear tracks. They weren't human. They were massive, maybe 18 inches long, like a bare foot, but the toes were too long and the heel was too wide. And they were deep, pressed into the hard-packed earth like something weighing 600 or 700 pounds had made them. But the worst part? There were smaller ones too, like a child's. They'd found tracks for what looked like a whole family of these things. Mark, trying to be the brave one, said they'd follow the tracks for a little while, see where they led. I told them absolutely not. I told them to sit tight and wait for the full SAR team. The next call I got was just static. Then a sound. A sound that I will never forget as long as I live. It wasn't a roar, and it wasn't a scream. It was something in between, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to shake the radio itself. Then I heard Sarah yelling, "Mark, no, get back, oh God, it's..." Then the line went dead. Just silence. We lost contact completely. We spent the next hour trying to raise them, but there was nothing. It was like the mountains had just swallowed them whole. The feeling of dread in my gut was so strong, I thought I was going to be sick. These weren't just my deputies. Sarah was family. We mobilized everything we had. State police, the Forest Service, a K-9 unit, and every volunteer searcher in a 50-mile radius. We hit the trail an hour later, a team of 20 men, all armed, all expecting the worst. When we got to the Millers' campsite, it was exactly as Sarah had described. The neat piles of gear, the shredded tent, the massive footprints. But now there were new signs. Signs of a struggle. The ground was torn up, and there was blood on the leaves. And lying next to the fire pit was Mark's radio, smashed to pieces. And next to that, half buried in the dirt, was Sarah's body cam. I didn't watch it right there. I couldn't. I tagged it as evidence and handed it to my senior deputy, Chen. We searched for the rest of the day, following the tracks as deep as we dared. They led us up the side of a ravine so steep we had to use ropes, into a part of the forest that wasn't on any map. The trees were older here, bigger, and the canopy was so thick it felt like twilight, even at 2 in the afternoon. And the smell, I'd never smelled anything like it. It was like wet fur and rotting meat and something else, something sharp and musky that made your eyes water. We had to call off the search when the sun went down. You don't stay in those woods after dark, not when you're hunting something you can't identify. We set up a perimeter back at the trailhead, but none of us slept. We just sat by the trucks, listening to the sounds of the forest. And the forest was not quiet anymore. We heard those same calls, those deep, booming vocalizations, echoing from the ridges all around us. It sounded like they were communicating, calling back and forth. It sounded like they were surrounding us. That's when I finally went back to my cruiser and watched the footage from Sarah's camera. What I saw on that tape is what has the authorities terrified. The footage started normally. Sarah and Mark hiking, joking around. Then they find the campsite. You could see the confusion on their faces, the way they looked at the neatly piled gear. Sarah's hands were shaking as she zoomed in on the tracks. "Mark, this makes no sense," she said, her voice tight. "What does that?" Mark asked. Then the camera panned up. Through the trees, maybe 40 yards away, something was standing there. It wasn't a bear. It was huge, 8, maybe 9 feet tall, covered in dark, matted hair, and it was just watching them. Mark unholstered his weapon. "Forest Service," he yelled. "Show yourself." That's when the thing moved. It didn't run like an animal. It moved with this impossible speed, sideways, blending into the trees like a shadow. Then the sound started. That booming roar, but it wasn't coming from in front of them anymore. It was coming from the side. From both sides. They weren't dealing with one. They were surrounded. Mark fired a shot into the trees. "Stay behind me, Sarah," he yelled, but his voice was cracking. The camera spun around as Sarah turned, and that's when we saw the other one. It was right behind them. It was massive, and it was holding Mark. It had him lifted off the ground like he weighed nothing. Mark was kicking, trying to bring his gun around, but the creature just squeezed. I heard the bones snap. I watched my deputy go limp. Sarah screamed, a sound that will haunt me until the day I die, and she started to run. The camera was chaos, just shaking images of trees and sky and leaves as she ran blindly through the forest. I could hear it chasing her. The heavy, thudding footsteps right behind her, crashing through the underbrush like it was nothing. She didn't make it far. She tripped over a log and the camera flew from her vest, landing in the dirt but still pointing back the way she'd come. She scrambled to her feet, but it was too late. The creature, the first one, stepped into the frame. It was so close the camera couldn't focus properly. It just stood over her, filling the entire screen. Sarah was sobbing, begging. "Please, no, please." The creature just looked down at her. Then it looked past her, directly into the camera lens. It wasn't an animal. It was thinking. It was processing. It reached down, not for Sarah, but for the camera. The last thing the footage captured was a massive, 5-fingered hand, more human than ape, reaching for the lens. Then static. By morning, the place was a circus. State police, FBI, and a couple of guys in black subs who wouldn't tell me who they were. I just called them the men in suits. The main guy, Agent Harris, took me aside. He was cold, with eyes that looked like they'd seen way too much. He didn't ask me what I thought it was. He asked me what the local protocols were for a containment failure. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. He just sighed like I was a child. He told me this was now a matter of national security and my department was to stand down. They took the body cam. They took my report. They took over the whole operation. The official story they fed the press was a rogue bear, maybe rabid. They said Deputy Donovan was killed by the animal and Deputy Jenkins had likely fled and fallen into one of the ravines. It was a clean story, a simple one, and it was a complete lie. They knew exactly what was up there, and they were terrified of it. I saw it on Harris's face every time he looked at the mountains. He wasn't scared of the creatures. He was scared of the truth getting out. The SAR team found what was left of Mark Donovan 2 days later. It was arranged, like the gear at the campsite. It was a clear message, a warning. They never found the Millers. They never found Sarah. The feds shut down the whole section of the forest, citing unstable geological conditions and bear activity. They posted armed guards at the trailheads. No one gets in, no one gets out. But I couldn't let it go. Sarah was my goddaughter. I had to know what happened to her. I started doing my own digging, off the books, late at night. I started with the old-timers, the ones who had lived in these mountains before the tourists and the hiking trails. I finally found an old Cherokee man named Samuel Stonewalker. He lived in a small cabin up near the reservation boundary. When I told him the story, he just nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting it. He told me the legends weren't legends. He called them the Esfinoi Atsili, the First People, or the Mountain Guardians. He said they aren't monsters. They're a society. They have laws. They have families. And they have sanctuaries. Sacred places where humans are not allowed to go. Samuel pulled out an old, hand-drawn map. It showed the mountains, but not with trails and elevations. It showed them with territories. He pointed to the exact area where Sarah and Mark had gone missing. "This is a protected place," he said. "A nursery. They were protecting their young. Your deputies, they ignored the warnings. The sounds, the tracks. They were warnings to leave." He said the First People rarely kill, but they will defend their families. He said they don't hunt humans, but they do take them. Sometimes, he said, his voice low, they take people, to teach them, to make them understand. That's when I knew Sarah might still be alive. The thought was both a comfort and a terror. What did "make them understand" mean? I asked Samuel if he knew where they lived. He pointed on the map to a series of canyons and ridges I'd never heard of. "The cave systems," he said. "They live beneath the mountains, not on them." He told me if I went there, I would not come back. He said the Guardians were already on edge. The feds, Harris's team, they hadn't left. They were up there too, hunting. And they were making the Guardians angry. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't mount a full-scale rescue, not against the feds and them. But I couldn't do nothing. I grabbed Deputy Chen, the only one I trusted completely, and we gathered our own gear. High-powered rifles, shotguns with slugs, night vision goggles, and Samuel's map. We told dispatch we were taking personal leave and drove my personal truck up an old, overgrown logging road that Samuel had marked. It got us within 5 miles of the cave system, bypassing all of Harris's roadblocks. We went in at dusk. The woods were different this time. They felt hostile. The silence was heavier, and the smell was everywhere. We moved slow, using the night vision. The forest was alive with sounds we couldn't hear. We could see heat signatures in the trees, watching us. Large, man-shaped heat signatures. They were stalking us, letting us walk deeper into their territory. It was a trap. We knew it, but we kept going. After 3 hours of the most nerve-wracking hike of my life, we found it. The cave entrance was hidden behind a waterfall, exactly where Samuel said it would be. It wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was massive, big enough to drive a truck into. We went inside. The air was warmer, and the smell was almost overwhelming. We could hear water dripping and something else. A low, humming sound. We followed the main passage for what felt like a mile. The walls were covered in paintings. My blood ran cold. They were just like the ones you see in textbooks about cavemen, but these were different. They showed the tall, hairy figures. They showed them hunting deer, but they also showed them building things. They showed them interacting with Native Americans. And then, in a newer section, they showed them interacting with modern men. Men in uniforms. Soldiers. Then we found the feds. Or what was left of them. Harris's team. It looked like there had been a firefight. There were shell casings everywhere, broken equipment, blood. And there were bodies. 3 of Harris's men, all dead from what looked like blunt force trauma. Their weapons were broken, twisted like pretzels. But Harris was gone. And then we heard the voices. Deeper in the cave. It wasn't the roaring. It was talking. Low, guttural, complex. It was a language. We moved closer, hiding behind a massive column of rock. We looked into a huge central chamber, lit by glowing fungi on the ceiling. What we saw, it wasn't a lair, it was a village. There were dozens of them. Males, females, and children. They were gathered around a fire. Harris was there. He was tied up, kneeling on the ground, and standing in front of him was the biggest one I had ever seen. It had to be 10 feet tall, with graying fur and a face that looked ancient and intelligent. It was the Alpha, and it was wearing something. A necklace made of body cams. Smashed, broken body cams. It was a trophy. And then I saw her. Standing next to the Alpha, not tied up, not scared. It was Sarah. She was alive. She was wearing clothes pieced together from skins and hiking gear. Her hair was matted, but she was healthy. She looked calm. She was watching Harris with a cold expression I'd never seen on her face. Harris was yelling, threatening them, telling them they had no idea who they were messing with, that the full force of the US government was going to come down on them. The Alpha just watched him, then it turned and looked at Sarah. It made a low sound. Sarah nodded. She walked over to Harris and she spoke to him. But her voice, it was different. Raspy, guttural. "They want to know why you hunt them," she said. Harris stared at her in shock. "Sarah, what have they done to you? Help me." Sarah just shook her head. "They didn't do anything to me, Sheriff," she said. And that's when I realized she was talking to me. She knew I was there. The Alpha turned its massive head and stared right at our hiding spot. It had known we were there the whole time. Chen raised his rifle, but I put my hand on it. "Don't," I whispered. "They were protecting me," Sarah's voice echoed in the chamber. "Mark shot first. They were just defending their home." "They killed him, Sarah. They killed the Millers," I yelled back, stepping out from behind the rock. The other creatures growled, stepping forward, but the Alpha raised a hand and they stopped. "They didn't kill the Millers," Sarah said. "They saved them, just like they saved me." She pointed to another passage. "The other hunters, your kind, they were here. Harris's team. They came to take one. The Millers saw them. Harris was cleaning up witnesses." My mind couldn't process it. Harris was the monster, not them. It made a horrible, twisted kind of sense. The cover-up wasn't to protect the public from the creatures. It was to protect his operation from the public. "He's lying," Harris screamed, struggling against his bonds. Kill them all." That's when all hell broke loose. From the passage behind us, more of Harris's men appeared. They must have been a backup team, following our signal. They opened fire into the chamber. The noise was deafening. The creatures didn't panic. They moved. They used the columns for cover, moving with tactical precision. They were smart. They were organized. Chen and I dove for cover as bullets sparked off the rocks around us. It was a three-way war. Harris's men, Brody's team, me and Chen, and the first people. The creatures were terrifying. They didn't use guns. They used their environment. They climbed the walls and dropped from the ceiling. They threw boulders the size of engine blocks. One of Harris's men was snatched from his feet by a massive hand that came out of a dark crevice, pulling him into the shadows with a wet crunch. Chen got hit. A round from one of the Fed's rifles caught him in the chest. He went down, and I knew he was gone. I was alone, trapped between soldiers and giants. I saw Harris get free in the confusion. He grabbed a rifle from one of his dead men and aimed it at the Alpha. Before he could fire, Sarah tackled him. They wrestled for the gun, and it went off. The shot hit the ceiling, bringing down a shower of rocks. Harris shoved her off and raised the rifle again, but the Alpha was on him. It didn't roar. It just moved, and the sound of Harris's end was lost in the echo of the gunfire. The remaining Feds saw their leader go down, and they broke, running back the way they came, the creatures chasing them into the darkness. And then it was just me, and Sarah, and the Alpha. The giant creature walked over to me. It was so tall I had to crane my neck back to see its face. Its eyes were ancient. It looked at me, then at Chen's body, then back to me. It made a low sound, almost like regret. Sarah walked over and stood between us. "He wants you to leave," she said. "He wants you to tell the others to stay away. This is their home. They won't let anyone else take it." I looked at her, at my goddaughter, who was now a stranger. "Come with me, Sarah. Please. It's not too late." She just smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was sad and old. "It is too late, Alan," she said, calling me by my first name for the first time in her life. "I understand now. This is where I belong. They're my family now." She touched my arm. "Go. They won't hurt you. But don't come back. Tell them the bear story is true. Tell them anything. Just keep them away." I dragged Chen's body out of that cave. It took me 6 hours. None of them followed me. When I got back to my truck, I just sat there until the sun came up. I retired a week later. The official report said Deputy Chen and I were attacked by the same rogue bear that got Mark and Sarah. A tragic training accident. Harris and his team. They were listed as missing in action, lost in the same unstable geology. A neat, clean cover-up. But I know the truth. The authorities are terrified, not of the creatures, but of the fact that we aren't at the top of the food chain. That there's something in those woods that is smarter, stronger, and has been watching us all along. Sarah's body cam captured the proof, and I'm the only one left who knows what it means. The woods are not empty. They're just not ours.